Hey there, Internet. Welcome to the Hard On Gear channel, where I discuss and review my used and abused knives and gear so that you know what is or isn't worth spending your hard-earned money on. Mail day. This budget CRKT knife has been on my list for a while, probably damn close to a year. The CRKT Columbia River Knife and Tool Company Minimalist. Which, holy smokes, what a tiny little thing, but this is awesome. This is very much designed to be a neck knife. It comes set up to be a neck knife. And I mean, you could wear this different place. You could set this up appendix carry, and it does come with what looks to be a little belt clip. So there are options for it, but I mean, geez, you wouldn't even notice this thing appendix or scout, or I mean, you could wear this thing pretty much anywhere on your waist, and you probably wouldn't notice it. Comes with the lanyard because, well, you can get a good 3-finger grip. You can see how the handle is shaped so that your 3 fingers slip in quite nicely. But without that lanyard, yeah, you're kind of missing a little something. It almost feels like a toy, like a little too dinky for you really to be able to do anything with. But it's funny with a little security of that pinky on the lanyard actually makes you feel like you can hold on to this thing a lot better. This comes in a variety of different colors and blade styles. I ended up getting the Wharncliffe because I do not own any Wharncliffe style knives. Quite frankly, they had no appeal to me and they weren't on my radar because they looked like a utility knife. However, in the last year or so of listening to Michael Janish's explanation around why he chose the Wharncliffe for the Yojimbo, and the Ronin knives, which I thought were cool, but again, the Wharncliffes were kind of a turn-off for me. But listening to his reasoning and I guess the testing that they did behind Wharncliffe versus different tantos and spear points and clip points and everything else, apparently Wharncliffe has pretty much the best cutting potential of anything if you're really looking to get deep gashes through something, defensively at least. And now, is this a good defensive knife? Not so much. I mean, backup, last-ditch effort, sure, you stab a coyote 1,500 times in the body and the neck with this thing, eventually they're going to die of blood loss, but you certainly can't get enough penetration for anything serious, if that's what you're buying it for. However, this is just generally a nice, light, extra compact EDC fixed blade. Decent amount of jimping on the back here just to give your thumb some grip if you're looking to drive into something without your thumb slipping off of it. Now, the way that the first finger position, this first forward finger choil position is set up, well, as small as this knife is, I don't think it's possible for your hand to slip up and get girdled by the blade if you were to have to try to stab into something and have to worry about that at all. Overall, seems like a very highly functional, very useful little handy blade that you could stick just about anywheres in case you ever needed a little backup or just wanted to carry something super tiny and super light if you were out on a hike or out in shorts or something where you didn't want to have a big piece of metal in your pocket. So let's just see with the edge. I always forget to do this when I do these unboxings, but yeah, typically, I mean, you're pretty much always going to get a hair-popping edge off of a factory sharp knife. I mean, it's probably worth testing just to see if there's ever a knife that shows up that doesn't have that kind of an edge on it, but typically a knife company is going to want to make sure that they give a good impression of their knives, so razor sharp out of the package, pretty expected, but certainly does seem to cut nice. Let's ruin that edge really quick and just try out some, hey, nice little shavings, come out pretty nice. So this feels pretty comfortable, and again with that pinky on the lanyard, I don't know why that gives me a little extra security, but I mean, this is fine too. You can certainly do it without the lanyard if you want to slim it down more. Ooh, careful. But that little extra security for me is kind of a big deal. So if you did have to do any bit of feather sticking, at least with this as sharp as it is right now, any kind of carving or anything like that, I mean, it's certainly not going to be your first choice, but still can do the job. How about the penetration? Good. Let's just round that freaking nice Wharncliffe off right away. Why don't we? But hey, so far so good. Anyways, for all of the price of $40. Yeah, I think it's about 45 bucks Canadian for this thing. Which, yes, you could say this might be a bit much for that, but I mean, compared to what? There's other small minimalist fixed blades that you can get, and there's cheaper stuff, and there's like $20, $15 dinky little things that you could probably use for some things, but something that's this utilitarian at this small of a package. It doesn't have the craziest materials on it. What are the handles? There, so I just had to double check the price and the materials. So what you're looking at is about $40 American, so about 50 bucks Canadian, and the handle material is a polished resin infused fiber. I really wasn't sure what that is, but it feels almost like a combination of like maybe wood and micarta or something. I'll do some research and brush up on my knowledge here before I do the full review on this thing and let you know for sure. Blade is 5 CR15 MOV. So that 5 CR15 should be performing what, something similar to an 8 CR13 MOV. Would it be a little higher in chromium, a little lower in carbon? Is that correct? Not a blade steel expert. But what that tells me is that this thing should be extremely stainless, but not the toughest thing in the world, that it's probably going to dull relatively easy, but probably going to be super easy to sharpen. The blade steel is probably going to perform something similar to what, OS 8, probably better than OS 6, better than 420 or 448. Somewhere's in that mid-range for your budget stainless steels. Again, blade experts, steel experts in the audience, let me know if I'm way off on that. And as far as what I plan to do with this thing, I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm sure I'm going to find a purpose for it somewheres, whether on maybe my kit for fire or something, backpack, something like that, maybe where it's got a permanent spot, just in case I ever were to be hiking, doing something like that, for some reason couldn't get to one of my normal everyday carry knives. And this is if this is sitting on my backpack strap, which I believe between these setups there's no problem at least lashing that to any kind of setup you'd want. But I feel like that's probably going to be the home for this thing, at least initially, and then of course we'll maybe do some testing and see exactly what that little Wharncliffe can do. And then when I get myself a larger Wharncliffe, probably a Yojimbo or Yojumbo or something like that, maybe the Canis, something along those lines, probably have a Spyderco Wharncliffe. We'll get to see some comparison between the little one and the big one. And I'm kind of curious to see how these cut, because I've used utility knives plenty back in my working for Loblaws days, a little bit in grocery department and that kind of stuff, but cut enough boxes and stuff anyways with utility knives that I certainly know how good utility knives are for the cheapness of them. So a higher quality blade with a Wharncliffe, I see the function. It's just, it took me a little while, and it took me, typically like most things, I may have an initial rough response to it, or might not think so highly of it until I hear someone super well experienced or articulate go through the pros and cons of why things are the way they are. That can tend to justify a little more purchases of things I'm not leaning towards as much. As well, this is more my style. Something like the Cold Steel Recon one, which size comparison wise probably, well, I guess it's a pretty good size comparison, because you can see that it's literally half the length and, well, a fraction of the weight, fraction of the actual size of the Recon 1. Now, the Rat Model 2 is still making that thing look just like a wee little guy. And just a couple more. Just there's the 940-2 and the M16. I tend to like bigger folding knives. A couple of these are somewhat smaller, but still nothing close to as small as that tiny little CRKT Minimalist. There's Leatherman Squirt, just to give you an idea. This little keychain pocket tool, just a little bit smaller than the Minimalist when it's extended, or opened, I guess. And why don't we just look at some other compact fixed blades and just see how they measure up compared to this guy. So, of course, let's haul out the Izula II and just take a look. The Izula II, not a huge knife, bigger than the Izula 1, bigger than the Candiru, an absolute monster compared to the Minimalist. And I ended up, instead of getting the Minimalist at first, I kind of liked the Cold Steel Burden Game. It's got a longer blade than my typical preferred spear point style blade, or modified drop point. I think spear point's what I'm always going to call that. I know there's different names, different companies. The CRKT, what I would call the spear point version, that black on black version. To me, that's a spear point. Apparently, they call it the drop point. To me, a drop point is something like you're going to find on the Rat Model 2. Still not a bad blade style. I just prefer something a little more like that. This thing makes any knife look gigantic next to it. There's the D.H. Russell #1 design, Groman knives. And there's your more companion, which a little bigger as far as compact fixed blades go, but just again, give you that size comparison for something you can find pretty much anywhere in any store. There's your average size, more companion knife, and there's your mini little Minimalist CRKT. So will I ever EDC this thing? Probably not, only because Izula #2 is just so much more capable, so much more rugged, 1095 carbon steel. I can beat this thing against a rock, and shouldn't do that, and I'm going to have to sharpen it after. I know the blade's going to survive, I know the knife's going to hold up. This thing's going to have its limitations, I'm sure. Maybe a little later in the channel when I have a little bit more of a following, then I can maybe supply myself with a little bit more, we'll say, knives purely for the sake of destroyment. Destroying. Anyways, we're gonna maybe get one of these in the future, and we'll see how far you could push something like a little tiny Minimalist. Just to see exactly what the limits are, how far we can push those knives before they snap in half or the tips break off and stuff like that. Useless, stupid, well, I shouldn't say useless, definitely stupid, but useful for anyone who wants to know how much they can get away with before they need to go and invest in something a little bit more rugged and a little bit more expensive. If you're watching this video in the future and those videos are up, check those out. I'm sure those are going to be entertaining. For now, there's plenty of other knife reviews and different conversation pieces. In the meantime, if you'd like to have a listen on to why I purchased knives like the Izula II or the Benchmade 940 or the Big Bag Cold Steel Recon one, which I consider very much the staple and the, I guess, the poster child of the Hog channel. So that'll be it for now for this unboxing. Thanks for watching. This is the Hard On Gear channel, signing off.